He promised he would never let me face grief alone. But when I needed him most, I found out whose tears he was really drying. My name is Elise. I am 32 years old, and 2 months ago, my father died after a long battle with cancer. He was the kind of man who made silence feel safe. Losing him felt like someone had turned the volume of the world too high. Every sound hurt. Every quiet moment reminded me that he was gone. Through all of it, my husband, Daniel, stayed by my side. At least, that's what I believed. We met at 23, married at 27. Daniel wasn't dramatic or loud. He was calm, grounded, the kind of person who makes life feel manageable. My dad loved him. He used to say that man's steady, Elise. You can build something on that. And I believed the funeral was small, family, close friends, a few of Dad's old co-workers. I remember Daniel standing beside me the whole time, one arm around my shoulders, handing me to, whispering things like, "You don't have to be strong right now." I leaned on him because I couldn't stand on my own. Afterward, people drifted home. My mom stayed with us for a few days. She and Daniel cooked, cleaned, handled phone calls I couldn't answer. Everyone kept saying how lucky I was to have a man like him, and I thought they were right. But grief is strange. It blurs Jimmy. It stretches nights and folds days into themselves. You stop noticing things, the hours your partner spends out of the house, the way their tone shifts, the text messages they answer in another room. You assume the world is kind enough to give you space to heal. 2 weeks after the funeral, Daniel said he was going to help a friend from work with a renovation project just for a few hours. He said. I nodded. I didn't question it. I was still wearing my father's old sweatshirt, still barely combing my hair. When he came home that night, he smelled faintly of perfume. I told myself I imagined it. I told myself grief can twist your senses. The next day, my mother decided to visit her sister out of town. I hugged her at the door and told her I'd be fine. Daniel kissed my forehead before leaving for work, told me to rest to maybe watch one of Dad's old favorite movies to feel close to him again. I cried halfway through it. When I texted Daniel to say I missed him, he didn't reply for hours. He said he was in a meeting. I believed him. But something started to itch at the back of my mind. Maybe it was the loneliness, or maybe it was instinct. I noticed how often he turned his phone face down, how his showers were longer, how he smiled when he scrolled through messages and then quickly looked away. Grief isolates you, and isolation makes you doubt your own sanity. I told myself I was paranoid, that I was still too raw from losing Dad. But when Daniel started working late nights 3 times a week, the doubt grew teeth. The following Sunday, I went to visit the cemetery alone. The air was cold, damp with the kind of fog that makes everything sound softer. I knelt by my father's headstone, tracing his name with my fingers, whispering how much I missed him. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something like peace. Until I looked up. Across the road, parked near the exit, was Daniel's car. I thought maybe he had followed me. Maybe he'd come to check on me. But the engine was running, and the headlights were off. I walked closer, heart pounding. Through the windshield, I saw him, his head tilted, his hand on someone else's shoulder. A woman, her face hidden by the shadows. They weren't talking. They were sitting too close, the kind of close that used to be ours. I froze. I wanted to scream, but my throat wouldn't open. I stepped back into the fog and waited until her hand lifted to his cheek. That's when I turned away. That night, Daniel came home smelling of rain and guilt. He kissed me like nothing had changed. Maybe to him, nothing had, but to me, everything had cracked. I didn't confront him. Not yet. I needed to know who she was. The next morning, Daniel acted as if nothing was wrong. He made pancakes, hummed a song while setting the table, kissed my shoulder when I passed him. He had always been good at calm, too good. But now, every ordinary gesture felt rehearsed. Every word was a prop in a performance I hadn't realized I was part of. I tried to stay composed. I didn't ask where he'd been the night before, or why he'd parked outside the cemetery instead of coming to find me. I just watched him. The way his eyes flickered when his phone buzzed. The way he smiled at messages I wasn't supposed to see. 2 days later, I decided to follow him. I told myself it wasn't spying. It was clarity. He said he was going to help a coworker named Mark move furniture. I nodded and smiled, but the moment he left, I grabbed my keys. His car led me across town, not toward Mark's street, but toward a part of the city I didn't recognize. A cluster of older houses, quiet and overgrown with ivy. He parked near one of them, stepped out, and walked up a small driveway. A woman opened the door before he could knock. I only saw her from the back, dark coat, long hair. She stepped forward and hugged him, like it wasn't the first time. I drove away before they could see me. My hands shook so hard on the wheel that I almost pulled over. But I didn't need to see more. The image was enough to carve itself into my mind. That night, he came home later than usual. I asked him how the move went. He said it was exhausting. He rubbed his shoulders, asked if I wanted to order takeout. He smiled through every line, and I matched it with silence. Over the next week, I started noticing small things I had never questioned before. His phone never left his pocket anymore. He deleted entire message threads. He showered immediately after getting home, saying it helped him wash off the day. Grief had made me slow before, but now suspicion made me sharp. One evening, I looked through his laundry before tossing it in the machine. In the pocket of his jeans, I found a folded note. It wasn't romantic, just a list of errands written in a familiar handwriting. I stared at it for a long time, trying to place where I'd seen that curve in the letters before. Then I remembered it was my mother's handwriting. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My brain scrambled for logic. Maybe she had written a grocery list for him before her trip. Maybe he'd just forgotten it in his pocket. But why would she write a list for him after she'd already left town? I called her. She didn't answer. I left a voicemail saying I hoped her visit with Aunt Lillian was going well. She didn't call back that night, or the next. I didn't tell Daniel. I just watched him more closely. The phone calls he took outside, the way he avoided my gaze when I asked simple questions like, how was work? The following Saturday, I went to the cemetery again. Not to visit my father this time, but to think the fog had lifted, replaced by brittle sunlight that made everything feel too visible. I stood by my father's grave and whispered, if you can see me, I need you to help me not lose my mind. When I turned to leave, I saw flowers, fresh ones, not from me, not from Mom either. She always brought lilies. These were red roses. My dad hated roses. He used to joke they were too proud for their own good. There was a card tucked between the stems. It read, you always said love and loss live in the same house. Thank you for reminding me what both feel like. No signature. Just handwriting that made my stomach turn. My mother's again. I didn't want to believe it. I told myself there had to be another explanation. Grief, coincidence, anything. But the truth was already building itself in my chest, piece by piece. The woman in the dark coat, the car outside the cemetery, the note in his pocket. Every clue pointed in one direction, one that I couldn't bear to look at directly yet. That night, Daniel sat beside me on the couch. He slipped an arm around me, turned on one of Dad's old favorite movies, and said he'd want us to keep smiling. I almost laughed, the kind of laugh that has no humor left in it. While he watched the screen, I watched him, and all I could think about was how betrayal never comes from strangers. It comes from the people who know exactly where you keep your pain. I needed proof, and if my instincts were right, I already knew where to find it. I used to think there was no pain deeper than grief. I was wrong. Grief hurts because of absence. Betrayal hurts because of presence. The person is still there, looking at you, lying to you, breathing the same air as if they deserve it. It was a Thursday when I found the truth, the kind of quiet afternoon that should have felt ordinary. Daniel had told me he'd be working late again. He said it so casually that I almost admired his ease, but I already knew what working late meant now. This time, I didn't follow him right away. I waited. I made you dinner, washed the dishes, and watched the clock until the minutes felt like weights. When 2 hours passed, I grabbed my jacket and keys. The roads were empty, washed in the orange haze of streetlights. My mind was calm in a way that scared me. There's a moment when your heart stops hoping for innocence. And in that stillness, you just want the truth. I didn't drive to his office. I drove to the house with the IV, the same one I'd seen before. It sat at the end of a narrow lane, porch light glowing faintly. His car was parked outside again, exactly where it had been the last time. I turned off my engine, sat in silence, and waited. I thought maybe I'd see her, the woman in the dark coat. Maybe I'd finally learn her name. I didn't have to wait long. The door opened. Daniel stepped outside first, glancing up and down the street like a man checking for witnesses. Then she followed, the same long hair, now loose around her shoulders. She wore my mother's red scarf. My body went cold. She turned her face toward the porch light, and there was no mistake left to make. It was her, my mother. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt, as if gravity had decided it was done holding me up. I couldn't hear anything, not the wind, not the cars, not even my own breath. Just the echo of her laughter, familiar and cruel, the same laugh that once filled our kitchen when Dad told his corny jokes. Daniel reached for her hand. She let him. Then he leaned in, brushing his lips against her temple with a tenderness that used to belong to me. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my fingers went numb. My vision blurred, and tears slid down my face without sound. I didn't scream. I didn't honk. I didn't confront them. I just sat there, watching the two people I trusted most walk back inside together, closing the door on everything I thought was real. When I finally drove away, the world outside felt unrecognizable. The streets blurred into streaks of light. My heartbeat was too loud. My throat burned with words I didn't know how to say. At home, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the framed photo of my parents for my wedding day. My mother's arm looped around my father's, Daniel standing proudly beside me, all four of us smiling. I pressed my hand against the glass and whispered, I'm sorry, Dad. The next morning, I didn't make you coffee. I didn't speak to Daniel when he walked in, pretending surprised that I was awake so early. He kissed the top of my head, but I didn't react. He told me he had an early meeting and left. 10 minutes later, my mother called. Her voice was soft, practiced the same tone she used when I was little and she was hiding something. She said she wanted to visit that evening. Just to check on you, she said. I miss you, I said. Of course. That afternoon felt endless. I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I just waited. Every sound, the ticking clock, the hum of the fridge, felt like a countdown. When she arrived, I greeted her with a calmness that wasn't real. She hugged me tightly, but I didn't hug back. I told her Daniel was running late, that he'd join us soon. Her face twitched, just barely. She set down the flowers she'd brought, asked how I was holding up. I told her I was fine. Then I said, You forgot your scarf. Her hand froze halfway to the vase. Slowly, she turned toward me. What? I pointed to the chair by the door. Her red scarf, the one from last night, was draped over it. She opened her mouth, but no words came. I said, You left it at the Ivy House. Silence. A long, heavy silence that stretched between us like wire. Then her face broke. She sank into a chair, covering her mouth with trembling hands. Elise, please. I held up a hand. I didn't want to hear the excuses. I didn't want to hear that it just happened, or that grief makes people lonely. I said, He was supposed to be comforting me. She started to cry. Big, ugly sobs that didn't sound like guilt. They sounded like fear. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said. We were both lost, and it just happened. He reminded me of your father. Those words snapped something in me. I laughed, a sharp, broken sound that didn't feel like mine. You mean he reminded you of the man you buried 3 weeks ago? She covered her face, shaking her head. I stood there, watching her unravel. The door opened behind us. Daniel walked in, froze mid-step, and looked between us. His face drained of color. He didn't ask how I knew. For the first time, I saw him without the mask, small, cowardly, desperate. My mother turned toward him, eyes red, hands clasped as if begging for a miracle that didn't exist. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just said one sentence. Both of you need to leave my house. Neither moved at first. Then Daniel stepped forward. Elise, please, now. He hesitated, but my voice left no space for negotiation. He reached for his keys, for his coat, for any version of dignity he could still pretend to have. My mother followed him, sobbing as they walked to the door. When it closed behind them, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was holy. It was the sound of something breaking, yes, but also of something new beginning. I stood there for a long time, breathing the air they'd left behind, and thought about how grief and betrayal are cousins, both come to show you what kind of love survives fire. The house sounded different after they left. The air felt lighter and heavier at the same time, like a room after a storm with the windows cracked open. I stood in the hallway and listened to the old clock mark the seconds. My father used to say that time is stubborn. It keeps walking even when you want it to lie down. I made tea because my body needed a task. Boil water. Choose a mug. Stir honey. The small ritual steadied my hands. On the kitchen counter sat the flowers my mother brought, their bright faces turned toward me as if they could apologize on her behalf. I moved them to the back porch and shut the door. My phone lit up. Messages from Daniel stacked in a column. I am sorry. Please let me explain. I was weak. I am ashamed. I love you. Then a call from my mother that I did not answer. Her voicemail came through in gasps and fragments. Elise, please. I never wanted this. I deleted it halfway through and set the phone face down. Grief is a teacher with a cruel curriculum. I had been learning how to live without my father. Now, I had to learn how to live without the version of my mother and husband I had believed in. Two losses layered on top of each other until it was hard to tell where one ended and the other began. I slept on the couch that night with a blanket pulled to my chin. I woke at dawn to the sound of birds and a slow ache behind my eyes. I sat up, stretched, and realized I did not need permission to do anything in this house ever again. The realization was quiet and powerful. I opened windows. I washed the glasses they had touched. I changed the sheets and put the red scarf into a box in the hall closet where I keep things I am not ready to throw away. Around noon, I called my therapist. She fit me in that afternoon. The waiting room smelled like lavender. I told her everything in a flat voice that did not feel like mine. The cemetery, the ivy house, the scarf. My therapist's face softened in that way. Good therapists have the way that makes you feel seen without being pitied. She said this was traumatic and that my nervous system would be looking for exits. Drink water, eat simple food, stay with people who tell you the truth gently. She asked if I had a support system. I said yes, friends, and Antu had always treated me like a second daughter. She nodded and helped me make a plan. When I left the office, Daniel was waiting in the parking lot. He stepped away from his car, hands open, eyes red. I stayed near the building door where the camera was. He asked for 5 minutes. I gave him 2. He spoke quickly, as if speed could keep the truth from catching him. He said after the funeral he felt useless and small, and my mother kept asking how I was doing, and they started talking about my father, and it got blurry. He said he had ended it. He said it did not mean he loved me any less. He said, love is complicated. I watched his mouth move and realized he still believed there was a version of this story where he could be forgiven because he had reasons. I told him there are explanations and there are excuses, and he had chosen the wrong category. I told him we would communicate only by email about practical matters. I told him he was not welcome at the house. He nodded like a child told to sit still. He asked if there was hope. I said hope belongs to people who tell the truth before they are caught. Then I walked away. My mother came by the next day without warning. I saw her through the peephole and did not open the door. She spoke into the wood as if it could carry her words to me better than her own honesty had. She said she had been lonely since Dad got sick, that she did not know where to put her hands when he was gone, that Daniel reminded her of the steadiness she had lost. She said she hates herself. I told her through the door that she needed to leave. I said we would talk when I decided I was ready, not before. She stayed for a few minutes, crying softly, and then I listened to her footsteps fade down the walkway. I spent that afternoon with my Aunt Lillian. She made soup and set the table with cloth napkins, even though it was just the two of us. She held my hand and let me sit in silence. Then she told me a story about my father I had never heard, about the time he drove 3 hours in the rain to fix a flat tire for a friend who could not afford a tow. She said my father believed in showing up. We cried and laughed, and it felt like oxygen. That night I wrote 3 lists on yellow paper. The first said legal, the second said home, the third said heart. Under legal I wrote a lawyer's name that Noor had sent and a reminder 2 separate accounts. Under home I wrote change locks, return key, box, photos, where I look at them by choice. Under heart I wrote eat, walk, sleep, call Lillian, no decisions about marriage for 3 months, no contact with mom until I choose it. I changed the locks the next morning. The locksmith stood on the porch and talked about the weather as if keys were just keys. When he handed me the new set, a calm settled over me that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with safety. 2 days later, I met with the lawyer. She spoke clearly and wrote dates in a neat column. She said I did not have to decide anything today. She said knowledge is a form of shelter. We drew a map of options: separation, divorce, mediation. I took the folder home and placed it in the drawer with the red scarf. 2 symbols of a split. 2 things I could open when I was ready. My phone stayed busy. Danielle sent apologies. My mother sent apologies. My aunt sent heart emojis and grocery lists, and the kind of reminders that keep a body moving. Friends filled the empty hours with walks and soft shows and small errands. I realized that healing did not have to be heroic. It could be ordinary and faithful. It could be choosing oatmeal over nothing and sunlight over a dark room. I went back to the cemetery by myself on a Sunday morning. I brought fresh lilies because they were my mother's favorite and I wanted to lay them at my father's. Stoned for her because she could not do it right now. The sky was a pale blue that looked almost new. I sat on the grass and told my father everything I had not said out loud. I told him that love had failed me in two places at once, and that I was still here anyway. I told him I was learning the difference between loyalty and self-abandonment. I told him I would try to forgive when forgiveness did not cost my sanity. On the way home, I drove past the Ivy house. The porch light was off. A for sale sign leaned against the fence with a fresh number pinned to it. I parked at the curb for a minute and watched a sparrow hop across the driveway. It felt like a small answer to a question I had not dared to ask. Not closure, but change. That evening, I packed a box of Daniel's things, a sweatshirt, a stack of books, the travel mug he loved. I set the box on the porch with a note that said, "Pick up Friday between noon and 2. He replied, "Thank you." He did not ask for more. I ended the night at the kitchen table with a slice of toast and a notebook. I wrote a single sentence at the top of the page. What I choose next belongs to me. Then I listed choices that were mine to make. Therapy, boundaries, time, letters I might write and never send. A visit with my mother one day on my terms in a public place where the conversation could have edges and an end. Before bed, I walked through each room and turned off the lights slowly. The house no longer felt haunted. It felt in progress. My father would have liked that. He was a man who appreciated a project that could be finished one careful step at a time. When I lay down, the quiet was not empty the way it had been that first night. It felt like space. I closed my eyes and imagined a morning where the first thing I thought about was not loss but breakfast, not betrayal but a list of small things to do. The image did not hurt. It warmed. I do not know yet what I will decide about my marriage or my mother. I only know that decisions made from fear become cages. I am not stepping into another cage. I am learning how to build a door. It has been 3 months since that night. The silence in my house doesn't feel like a punishment anymore. It feels like peace. Daniel moved out completely. He sent one last message saying he understood if I could never forgive him and that he would always love me. I didn't respond. Some things don't deserve a final word. They deserve an ending. My mother is living with my aunt now. We still haven't spoken face to face. She's written letters, all of them filled with apologies and explanations I'm not ready to read. I keep them in a drawer beside the scarf. I don't know if forgiveness will ever come, but I know it won't come from guilt, only from distance and time. Sometimes I still catch myself expecting my father's voice when the phone rings, or thinking I should tell him something funny that happened at work. Then I remember he's gone, and yet I feel him in small things, the smell of coffee in the morning, the way sunlight hits the kitchen counter, the sound of rain on the roof. He's everywhere peace lives. I visit his grave every Sunday. The last Shimi I sat there longer than usual. I told him I was trying my best, that I was learning to live without begging the past to change, that I had stopped asking why and started asking what now. When I left the cemetery, the world looked softer. Not fixed, but livable. I drove home with the windows down, breathing air that didn't taste like grief anymore. That night, I finally took off my wedding ring. I didn't throw it away. I placed it inside a small wooden box and closed the lid. It's not about erasing the past. It's about no longer letting it define what comes next. I am not healed, not completely, but I am whole enough to keep moving. And maybe that's the real victory. Not getting revenge, not watching them suffer, but reclaiming the parts of myself that they broke and realizing they still work. Life goes on. The pain dulls. The air clears. And one day, you wake up and realize that surviving was never the point. Living again was. Now, I want to ask you, if you were in my place, could you ever forgive your mother for something like this? Or would that be the one betrayal you could never come back from?